Thanks for joining me today. We are on the sixth stage of grooming. And as we have talked through the other five stages, it's really amazing to me how the master manipulator, the groomers, the people with the silver tongues know how to enter into each and every person's life to build that intimate personal relationship with them in order to cause chaos and to, look over here instead of looking at what might be happening to a young person. That's why I think my family's story was so incredible, out there in the world because it really highlighted how each person in our family was groomed and manipulated by Berchtold. And I know he's not, I mean, I think he was brazen and maybe really that's all he thought about was the next, it was like a game somehow in some way because he always had another little girl, that he was already abusing while he was building the trust, while he was targeting the next victim, while he was isolating the players around the child and the other people. He isolated every member of our family. So and had special relationships with everyone. So now that the sexual abuse, as the sexual encounters have begun, which is stage 5, there's all this buildup to that. There's all of these other things. So targeting the victim, knowing that you have picked out someone who might be susceptible and have a need that you can fill. So you've already kind of targeted, who are the people that are the nicest? Who are the people that are the most, naive? All of these things were definitely tactical maneuvers on the part of this groomer and this master manipulator, who I also believe was a psychopath. But when they f when they begin to build trust and they do everything in their power to find those things that would be the most trustworthy to the individuals around their, intended victim, I think that's when it really starts to get, interesting and where we might be able to catch perpetrators in the act. It's that overdoing of special relationships, that isolation of people, which is, the next step. Step 4 or stage 4 is isolating various people, but isolating the child as well, and starting to build those special relationships of trust with individuals as well as with the collective, which is exactly what he did. And then we get to the beginning of the sexual, um, abuse, and then the final stage is to maintain the control. So, once that abuse has started, the perpetrator has to maintain control and will continue to manipulate, the child and the other people around the child if it's not a family member. Sometimes um it is an offending parent who is grooming and manipulating the non-offending parent. That's really common, and I think you see that if you happen to watch our, 9-part series, you really see the way that a spouse like Gail could be manipulated and groomed to not say anything because of the outcomes for her could have been, I don't know, maybe there was some kind of threats of violence, certainly a threat of leaving, that he would leave her, um, that she wouldn't have anybody else, that, "No, you're not worthy of other people's love. You don't please me enough. You wouldn't please somebody else." You see all of those examples. And then, of course, there's the fact that he's the breadwinner. He's the one that's bringing home, the financial support. And certainly, I believe even now, you know, uh, even a single parent income, many, women work and and they have good careers, but even with that, oftentimes it's really hard to make ends meet. So back in the 70s when a lot of our moms did not work and they were completely dependent financially. So you have these layered effects of how manipulators, masterfully groom everyone who might get in the way of their target. And then to maintain that control, let's just start with the young person, the child. Let's just start with myself. So after, of course, I was, also kidnapped, which makes it a little easier, I guess, because I was out of the comforts of my home and I was scared. And he had a very elaborate brainwashing scheme. But let's just talk about the maintaining control that he used that other people who have been through this sort of thing would relate to. And maybe it would help you see when somebody is maintaining control over you. And maybe it's for a nefarious, anytime somebody's maintaining control over another human being, there's something wrong. And you should know that that's absolutely not something you have to live with. It's not something that you should put up with. And it is not healthy. That person is either, maybe they are narcissistic personality disorder. I mean, a true narcissist maintains control in the most charming and self-serving ways known on earth. So I really believe that this man was definitely a narcissist. It was all about him and what he wanted and pleasing him. And he was also a criminal. And to maintain control over me, he had to manipulate a story that he may not have even needed in other cases because I know I was the only girl he kidnapped, uh, except for one other that I know he held at his apartment for over 100 and I think it was like 120 days or something that she had run away, and, he had her at his apartment, but that's what she was telling her mother. So he maintained control by removing at least the 2 of us, her for a period of time, me for, those 2 kidnappings. But in order to continue to manipulate me when I was found and brought home, he had to set up an elaborate, um number of ways to make sure that I would continue to be scared and I would continue to see aliens in normal people. And there's a scene in A Friend of the Family where I'm court ordered to go to a doctor. And of course, my parents want me to go and be seen by a doctor. And of course, I've never had any kind of a, female exam before. I'm still this little prepubescent little girl. It was very terrifying, by the way. And to have someone, looking in my parts, and trying to see if there was damage, there was a nurse at the doctor's office that for whatever reason in my young mind, because this is what happens, this is how they maintain control. He had said they look like us, so we won't be able to tell who they are, but twice during the first kidnapping in where we ended up in Mazatlan, Mexico, 2 different times, he had said one time we were at this, like, restaurant, kind of like a bar/restaurant. I remember because it had black and white big square tiles on the ground, and he had given me what was, I thought, a Shirley Temple, which is I never knew what that was until he takes me to this place. He says, "Oh, it doesn't have any alcohol in it because we don't drink alcohol." And yet I'm positive it had alcohol in it because I remember they had like a band or something, music playing, live music, and he got me up, out of my seat and was trying to dance with me, and then he'd be like, come on, you're a good dancer." And I remember I was kind of like almost limp, almost like the floor was coming up, and the floor got closer and closer to me as if I was either squatting down as I was stepping or dancing, or the floor just looked like it was moving up. And I look back on that experience, and I remember right before he got me up to dance, he said something along the lines of, "I think that one lady, she wasn't our, server, but he kept saying, "She f doesn't her voice," like, you could hear her talking, like, to the next table, her voice and her eyes, I think that could be Zeta or Zethra." And so he had already planted this seed in my head, and because this woman had dark hair and very, very clear blue eyes, which were not common, um, in Mexico, or at least not that I had seen. She looked different enough that it scared me, that I was like, "Okay, we gotta do all the things right. Oh, yes, let's dance. Let's make sure that I'm only talking to the male companion." It was like he planted that seed, and then I remember another time later on when it was getting close to the time that the FBI and the federales, found us and knocked down the door, that we were playing. I had made a friend in the trailer park, an older woman, and she taught me how to play cribbage, and, and I learned how to play that game, and, when I and she had met him too, thought he was my father, this beautiful, darling, daughter, and beautiful, dad on a trip, you know, uh, can't remember what our story was. I know the second time I was kidnapped, my mother had been killed in the Lebanon crisis, but the first time, I can't remember if my mother had died. Something had happened to my mother, which is why dad was, such a great dad, taking me on these amazing, trips and spending all this time with me. Something had happened with my mother. And so this lady just took, really, she was just really sweet to me. Anyway, when I came back from playing the game, and that was such a nice break in my day. I wish I knew her name and could remember it, and probably not alive now because she was quite older, probably older like I am now, like in her 60s or 70s or something. And it just was one of those times where I was so happy to have something else to do and to think about and to distract my mind from the mission and all of the, abuse that was happening. And he said to me when I came back to the motorhome, he said, "Do you think she's one of them? Do you think she might be one of them?" And it's funny how I said, "No, I don't think so," because she didn't have dark hair and blue eyes. And I'm telling you, after I got home and was back in my surroundings, in my old bedroom, which was kind of a terrifying place at this point, but I was down in my bedroom and I was out in the community and got back into school and going to the doctor. There was a nurse with this very dark hair and these really blue eyes. And I just knew that that was one of them. And so maintaining control can even happen when the perpetrator is not around. If they have set up your life in a way to see something dangerous, you will see it even if it's not there. It's like one of those tactics in manipulation and control that often perplexes people. They think, "Well, why don't you leave? I mean, he's not there all day. He goes to work, or, why can't you just put your couple of kids and pack a bag and leave?" It's it's because the person is seeing and experiencing something without the perpetrator even being physically present. That is maintaining control. There is so much terror. Of course, for me also, it was about protecting my family. That's how he maintained control, that they had told us that Susan was like me, and she would be taken. She would be the next one that would have to do the mission, and I didn't want that for her. I you protect your little sisters. My sister Karen had the threat of that she would go blind, and she had always said, which is one of those things he picked up on during those 3 years of grooming and manipulating the whole family into positions of trust. He had picked up on when Karen had said, "Oh, it would be okay if I didn't hear, but I could never lose my sight. I have to see things. I have to see, the beauties and be able to see the equations." And she was already really good at math and science, and it's interesting how just these little innocent comments he was able to pick up on and know that those particular threats would keep me in his control. He was maintaining control from a distance, from a jail cell. in Mazatlan, Mexico, from a jail cell in Pocatello, Idaho. And then just by looking at me across the congregation at church, because of course he posted bail. Of course he's out. And now it's even more threatening every time I catch his gaze, and I know I'm gonna have to meet up with him. We have to continue the mission. And am I doing everything right? Am I even allowed to talk to his boys who are our closest, some of our closest friends that we've ever had? And was that allowed? Was I going to get in trouble? Was someone going to get hurt in my family? So there's a lot of different kinds of threats that a perpetrator can come up with to maintain control, but certainly things like, "Oh, nobody will believe you if you tell them." I mean, I'm the, lead, detective, or I'm an attorney, in town, or I'm you know, you have perpetrators who mask behind their position in the community. "Oh, I'm a religious leader. Oh, I teach Sunday school. Oh, well, I'm the one who coached all these kids, and now they're going to these amazing schools on full scholarships for sports or for drama or, you know, music." It's just amazing to me how often the position that a person holds is how they continue to maintain threats and how people will not go against them. Not Certainly not their closest, loved ones, so to speak. And so that non-offending parent who doesn't know how to leave and honestly believes that, yeah, nobody would believe me because everybody, admires who this person is. They don't know what's going on behind closed doors. I just think that the threats that they make to people's lives, or the lives of their loved ones are certainly the most effective kinds of ways to maintain control. Another big one for me was that if I didn't do the right things, if I didn't follow the rules, that I would be vaporized. Now, I did not have anyone ever tell me what vaporized meant. I knew what a vaporizer was because we used a vaporizer with the hot steam that, and the smelly, Vicks Vapor Rub or whatever in it when we would have a cold during the winter or the flu. My mom had one of those, and I have one of those, that I've used with my kids. And so I knew what a vaporizer was, and I knew it let out hot steam. And so being vaporized in my mind probably meant that I would be, like, burned up, like, steamed to death from the inside out. So I made up something so horrible. I made it up based on what was said, and I at one point, I said, "I don't even know what vaporized means." And he said, "I don't know, but it must be something like burning in fire or something," And so it just confirmed what I had already thought about in my mind, like hot steam, being boiled alive from the inside out, vaporized if I didn't follow the rules. I mean, it was terrifying. And, you know, if you can control a person's environment long enough, and certainly by being removed from my home and being kidnapped, he was controlling everything about my environment. If I slept, if I ate, if I got to have fun with the neighbor to play the cribbage games, and she taught me a few card games and a few things, but I remember that one in particular. And when, the abuse would happen, of course, when those alien voices would come on and he would freeze in a trance. So when I look back at the amount of control that he maintained even after I was found and brought home, it was just really, you know, I was so scared, and I didn't associate that I was scared of him. I thought I was scared of the alien people, and even for them, I wanted to help their people. So he also, which is another way that they work with maintaining control, is they appeal to your inner core values. And I think that's a really interesting one that he used a lot on my father and my mother. What were their core values that I could use to be relatable so that I can continue to maintain the control when they mess up and they do something that they both know is wrong and they both feel so embarrassed and so bad about it. I'm still maintaining control because they don't want everybody to know. Um, so that's that blackmail piece where let me see if I can first of all relate to them and their values. For me, it was like going on a mission was something that I had seen happen over and over again in my own, congregation and people that we knew, uh, lots of people that I kind of looked up to and that I really thought they were, so nice, the older, mostly the guys, but there were some older boys that ended up, going on missions that they were the fun people, they were like the 16, 17, 18-year olds that were always the life of every activity at church, they were having, they were the ones that would make it fun. And same with the older girls too. So you have this combination of how do I get inside of what matters to each person and relate to them as if it matters to me too. So we have all these things to talk about, have these deep conversations about, whether it could be somebody manipulating you, with political, ideologies or beliefs. And maybe they don't even think that, or with religious beliefs and ideologies and dogma that they may or may not actually believe in. But if they show up in the right place, you think that they do. And then they use those things to also maintain control. So it was um, a really elaborate way that he maintained control over, all of us for a very long period of time. And I even see that in, you know, um, both of my dad's experience with him in the car, that masturbation experience and my mom's short lived affair. I see the manipulation that how he just, you know, please help me out, be a friend, help me. And I can't help it, Marianne. I'm in love with you. I mean, all of those compliments are also ways of maintaining control. All of those ways that I just can't control myself around you, Marianne. I just, you were the one that I didn't meet soon enough. It was all those sorts of things build up as a way of not only building this trust and these deep relationships, but then maintaining control over people, especially if you can then get them to do something that goes against their core values and then be embarrassed and you can blackmail them. That's how it works. So keeping me scared attached me even further to my perpetrator. I was even attached to be even more because he was like the safety zone. So I know that sounds probably really strange to people, but that's the truth. He was the confidant. He was in this, we were in this together. So being attached to the perpetrator is where all the secrecy starts to come in, where the rules started to come out, where we can't tell anybody these secrets or these things may happen. So, as you build up all of those various layers, you really can keep control of people for a very long period of time, especially if you play upon, you know, um, religious beliefs that are so deeply held, by people. And you play upon those relationships that are important to, a mother with her children, to or a father with his children. I mean, because there are manipulators that are female for sure. There are narcissistic, you know, um, but when it comes to abuse and domestic violence and the abuse of especially young children. It's almost always a male or a father. Um, as the child gets older, that kind of changes, and it's a lot based on other members of your community and your inner circle, whether it's an extended family member or is somebody at church in your community or neighborhood. So, um, if you know what's going to happen to you if you tell, which for me it was being vaporized, um, for other people that I've had conversations with, it was, I'll kill you. I'll kill you if you tell. That's been a very, that's one of those that people use, and because usually the perpetrator is bigger than you, um, and maybe stronger than you. That's a very, very sensitive threat to a female and a girl. Um, or I'll beat you up. I'll kick your ass. If you say anything. So violence is also that kind of secret weapon. That's a good way to put it. It's a secret weapon that you can basically start this manipulation and this maintaining control at any stage of the grooming process. But it really comes into play at the end so that you can continue to abuse your victim. You can continue to get them to be compliant and to do whatever you tell them to do. So I hope that this, series on our 6 stages of grooming has been helpful and that using personal experiences has helped maybe someone out there look at their own, their family members, their friends, their neighbors, their congregants, their business associates. People are really good at this. They are really masterful. And I think that when you are more educated and aware, and you have to be in the world today, if you're going to see what is so very hard to see because it starts so slowly and it's a process over time usually. There's occasional, definitely there's occasional times when an opportunity arises and a perpetrator will take advantage of that opportunity. But if they're somebody close to you, and it almost always is someone that you know, they're going to go slowly. They've already built a relationship with you. You may already trust this person. I've had so many stories about a parent or a step parent that had, the mother, all my stories on this are women, the mother so scared or so blinded that she could not believe the child or the teenager or even the young adult. And I think even today, that happens so much where you're like trying to tell someone in your life needs you to listen and believe them. And you just don't because you just are unwilling to consider the fact that someone you know, love, and most likely already trust could be doing this to your child or to you. So I really hope that going through these stages, let's just do them one more time to wrap up. You target, they first of all target who the who the victim is going to be, and they look at everybody around their target. So they've targeted the victim and people around the victim. Then they begin to build the trust, to fill a need. So building trust, filling a need. Those are the first 3 stages. They're going to fill the need that they see in not only the young person, but in the other people around the young person so that they can gain that trust and so that they can fill each of these people's needs. And then they move from that into isolation. So they're building, their own relationship with the child, and also could be doing the same thing with other family members or the friends around the family so that everybody is not looking at this person cross-eyed in any way, shape, or form, like something's wrong. And then after that, the sexual assaults begin, and it could begin slowly, like we talked about, and then they escalate to full on sexual assault, abuse, violence. And then the last stage is this one. They maintain that control, and it can go on for years and years and years. I know people that said my earliest memory was my grandfather being in his bed, him abusing me. And mom and dad are out there, you know, grandpa's taking a nap with little 3-year-old and for 10 years until this person went to a health class and realized, oh my gosh, this shouldn't be happening. I've never really liked it, but grandpa also pays attention to me. So the complexity of these relationships that are groomed and then manipulated and then maintained is immense. And you have to really know that what happened to you was not your fault because you were outmatched by someone with this kind of an ability to slowly lead you. Not always slowly. Sometimes it happens faster than slowly. So don't let me say that just because that was the case with me. But it is 100% the perpetrator is to blame. It is not your fault. But now as adults, we are learning how to recognize things that we didn't see or recognize or that other people that are in our lives didn't see and recognize because they didn't know either. And now we're going to do better and we're going to have a safer world and we're going to speak up and say something and do something. And we're going to talk about what you should do in a further series because I think people oftentimes don't do the right thing. We did talk about when someone discloses and those different steps. We have done a series on that. But we're going to talk about who do you go to, in a little more detail in a future episode. Thank you so much for listening and for helping me and others who care about this horrible abuse of children to make an impact that it might end or be prevented. Thanks.